Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is United vs. Everybody. I am your host, Sean. You can see that today I am joined by a special guest. I have the privilege of chatting with football agent and owner of OmniSports Agency, James Featherstone. James, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, share some insight. How are you?
Very good, thank you. It's absolutely my pleasure and privilege. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you taking the time. So you and I, we met through the course through the PFA. We chatted a bit here and there throughout the time, just a little bit here, and it's been a minute since we've chatted as well. It's good to see you again. And what I really appreciated during that course is you had taken an interest in some of the psychological aspects of what was being discussed and everything. And I think that for me, in knowing you're an agent and whatnot, I think that really jumped out at me, showed that you really were very interested in that. And so it kind of led me to want to learn a little bit more about your experiences as an agent, maybe why you went into the course and how you see that relating to just your role in football these days. And so I have a lot of questions to go through. I hope you're up for it. Like I said, I'm not going to bug you about transfers and whatnot. So anybody watching, we're not going to talk about that, but you're not going to get off light because we got a lot of questions. So you ready for that?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's dive in, you guys. Make sure you guys make sure you subscribe. Let's jump right in. So obviously you were a player prior to becoming an agent. So when you retired though from playing, how did you go from football to becoming an agent? What was that path like versus pursuing something else like coaching or punditry? How did you maybe dive into becoming an agent?
So I was super fortunate that I had a father that placed as much emphasis on education as he did on football. So almost a condition to me going training was that I had done my homework. So thankfully, I'd carried on with my education. Even when I was playing full time, I did further education while I was playing. So I had qualifications to fall back on, but no work experience. I guess I the listen. I didn't get what I wanted from a football career, and I think that okay, it was injury at the end, but then I came across injury after I'd left the Premier League and I'd been out on loan and I was playing at a lower level. So I think ultimately that's rejection and that's failure. And all I really knew when I took the decision to no longer pursue a career in professional football was that I didn't want to be in football. So I went down a completely different pathway and I was in banking for 8 years. Banking in the early 2000s was amazing. It was fast paced. I remember the first time I stepped onto a trading floor, and for me, it was probably the closest that I could see in a workplace to a dressing room. You know, in terms of the banter and the ego and the competitiveness and the meritocracy, and yeah, it seemed very familiar to me, but a different industry and a different setting. So I really found my feet in banking. I really enjoyed it. I had 8 fantastic years in banking, and then things go in cycles, right? So the credit crisis hit. I'm old enough to have been around at that time, obviously, and all of a sudden, look, without putting too fine a point on it, I was a young man. I was working harder than ever, but the opportunity to earn was less than ever. So I knew I had to leave banking. I had no clue what I was going to do. I was working at a great organisation at the time. I had 12 months' notice, so I handed my notice in. I was head of treasury at the time, so we made money in good times and bad times. So we were actually making money. So I think I was a loss, to the bank because I was an asset to the bank. They were intrigued as to what I was going to do. I had no clue at the start, and then I remember we were going as a friendship group. We were meant to be going to Las Vegas, funnily enough, on your home shores. And I said to the guys, "Look, I'm not coming. I need to sort out my life. I need to sort out, where I'm going, what I'm doing."
Wow.
And to them, they weren't. They were just living in football, right? They didn't even really understand what was going on. They didn't really understand credit crunch and everything that was happening in the mortgage market and everything else. So it was as much from them as from me, really. They're a really close group of pals. I played a lot I played with a lot of them, and they were like, "Well, you're more or less my agent anyway, so why don't you just be my agent?" And
Wow.
the thought of being an agent at the time didn't really sit well with me. But then towards the back end of my banking career, I've been a little bit in football. We'd created a specialized finance business within football. I don't claim any IP for any of the products or the solutions that we were implementing. But what I did have was a network. So I'd kind of come back into football. I'd introduced that team to a lot of the clubs, chief executives, owners. And I was always really well received. Football's a really small world. And
Mhm.
even though I'd only played a small part in it 8 years prior, it was really easy to enter back into. So yeah, it was pals that were like, well, listen, probably without even realizing that I'd become a sounding board for them. Um, and at the time, the market was rife with like tax avoidance schemes and get rich quick schemes and all this kind of stuff. And the guys were like, I think looking around the dressing room, seeing a lot of wrong decisions and kind of going, well, I would have done that if my mate hadn't have told me not to do it, and I was that guy. So I helped one of them out, and during that process, the chief executive of the club even turned around to me and said, "You're really good at this. You should do it." So it kind of, got the
Yeah.
cogs turning even more. And probably naively at the time, I always had this burning desire to have like a sports, like a family office for sports professionals. But I think that was just because all I knew was football and finance, and that was a really good way to put the two together. And
Yeah.
actually, when I started looking at it, I felt like I could really add value by um, looking after careers, developing talent, and yeah, set up OmniSports. And here we are, gosh, like 18-ish years later. And like I say, I'm not going to it's amazing, isn't it? When people tell a story backwards, you tell it with so much kind of strategy and everything was calculated. If I'm completely honest, it's right place, right time. It
Mhm.
made sense in that moment, and I've been incredibly fortunate. And it's something that I don't take lightly. I don't let it pass me by. I talk a lot about the privileged position we're in, and yeah, how grateful I am for all of the opportunities that have come my way, and hopefully will continue to.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like you kind of, like you're saying, maybe naturally gifted in that way, and I do agree that in sound like what some of your friends were saying. I think the people that some of these players surround themselves with, whether that's family, friends, or agents or whoever, I think that does make a big difference. I think that pops up a lot. So it sounds like you've definitely been a benefit to those guys. So naturally kind of gifted, and you like maybe not to discredit yourself, but you even said, right place, right time. Don't sell yourself short, right? But there's still an actual process to it, right? There's coursework, there's licenses, there's exams, there's all sorts of actual regulations. And what was it? What was that part of it like? Kind of early doors, going through that actual process, because like for me, like therapists, there are a lot of people who are probably right good listeners, the friends like that. But in order to be a therapist, you have to go to school and you have to take an exam and you have to take a like an internship and whatnot. So for you, what was that part of it like?
Um, so I'd had a pretty intense journey within banking because I remember turning up at the bank and like everyone was from like Eton and Sandhurst, and they were Oxbridge educated and far more intelligent than I would ever be. So I had to catch up really quickly. So I did a lot of studying, specialised in treasury, like I said. So I'd kind of, I'd always hit the books, and I'd always kind of enjoyed the theory of things as much as the practice, but then equally always had an outlet for that practical application as well. Um, so, like anything, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it right. So, yeah, we were licensed at the time when I started. I found that quite easy, if I'm honest. The kind of the regulatory side of it is fairly straightforward. It's huge in volume. If
Yeah,
you look at FIFA's statute of transfer of players, it's
I
pretty.
have. It's-
Yeah. And trimming that down to multiple choice questions and everything else. But a lot of it's logic, a lot of it's common sense, Right? And then there's some tiny maths to it when you look at like training compensation and things like that. But as soon as you've looked at it once, it's not difficult to work out. So yeah, I found that relatively easy. I think it was more in the early days. Was the gravity really, in terms of like, players get one career, they get one shot at it, and then all of a sudden you put front and center, and you're meant to be this kind of, all seeing, oracle of knowledge. And the reality is, hindsight's an amazing thing. Nobody has a crystal
Yeah.
ball. So I think, day one, I always say, like, so fortunate we were able to set up our shop accordingly. We're a players agency. We put our players first in every single action. And I think ultimately, if you go into any situation with your players' best interests at heart, I'm obligated. It's a non-negotiable. I have to be educated. I have to listen. We met on a course. I'm
Yeah.
an old man now, and I'm still educating myself. So
Yeah.
there's proof of what I'm saying. I think, yeah, ultimately, if you're in that situation, yes, there's a lot of obligations and non-negotiables. But I think equally, if genuinely you've got your players' best interests at heart, I always still to this day say to our players, like, hopefully you're going to have decisions to make. Nobody will know verbatim whether this is the right decision or that's the right decision. But the one thing you can guarantee is, in a career in football and an industry like football, once you've made that decision, how you apply yourself the very next day will make that the right decision.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it was more, there was very little inertia around the regulatory landscape or the educational requirements or anything like that.
Yeah.
If I'm bluntly honest, my biggest anxiety inertia was just around the gravity of ultimately, having, something that somebody holds so close to their heart naturally, their career and everything they've ever worked for. Yeah, being a part of that is something not to be underestimated or not to be flippant with in any action.
No, yeah, it makes complete sense. I think it's commendable how seriously you take that aspect of it, because like you're saying, players have short careers, and sometimes little decisions can have very big ramifications long term and things. And so it's important to have the people and agents who do put in the work, who do put in the time, who have put in the work. And I think that naturally it sounds like you do have a bit of a hardworking mentality as well. And I think that does say a lot about you and the way you were brought up to it. I think that's kind of a natural thing there. So you've been doing the agency for a while. Did you start off doing your own agency, or did you kind of work with someone else and then jump into that and decide further down the line? Because that's a big step, starting your own business.
Yeah, so thankfully I didn't have any kids right in that moment in time. They came along not too long after, but they came along after. Um, yeah, I I'd worked for the man, right? I'd been in banking for 8 years, and yeah, that was a big part of it. Was to I don't know, like, call it naivety, arrogance, ignorance. I don't know, but like, I had a really strong feeling of what it needed to look like,
Mm,
and I felt as though if you brought other people's wants and needs into that, then there could be too much flex there. And like I say, I think once you listen, my first clients were my mates. Like, you
yeah.
cannot not put your friends first, right? In any situation, if there's only one seat at the bar, I'm the guy that would let my mates sit down and I'll
Mm,
stand. So you can't not put them first. But equally, I'd left a really good career, so I didn't leave that career to set up you know a lifestyle business or a cottage industry. I always wanted to scale, and still got plans above and beyond where we're at today. So that kind of, I always say, we're really fortunate. We set up our shop accordingly day one, and part of that was being in control of my own destiny and having a really strong feeling of who and what we, not only were in that particular moment, but equally what we wanted to be and how we wanted to feel as well.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, you probably remember, I have a small business myself. My wife and I own our practice, and it's funny because some people are say, "Oh, you don't have a boss. It's nice," but I'm like, well,
Hmm,
yes, I don't have a boss, but I'm also beholden to the shareholders, right? The clients, my employees, and things. I have a responsibility to do best by them as well, and it's the same for you, right?
for sure.
What does the day to day look like for a football agent? Just the normal kind of week, the day to day kind of process. I mean, some people probably think you're constantly traveling, you're constantly on the computer, you're constantly on the phone. What's it look like for you as being a football agent on a regular basis?
I'm not a big computer guy.
Yeah,
I'm not really a big emailer or. I love a spreadsheet. I love Excel.
yeah.
Excel is one of man's greatest inventions. Um,
Are you using all the macros and whatnot to make it be?
I love
Yeah,
a formula. Yeah.
whoosh, yeah, all that goes over my head.
No, it's mainly on the phone, and then because obviously we're so blessed in Europe that everywhere's accessible. Yeah, a lot of it's planes, trains, automobiles. Again, though, that's like so. One of our guiding principles is delivery on trust. I think it'd be really easy to say be trustworthy. You know, have that as a guiding principle or an aspiration to be trustworthy. I find earning trust quite simple, if without sounding flippant. Because if you've been around, done a few deals, don't forget the majority of our clients, the majority of players and families, it's uncharted water for them, right? It's the first time they've ever been in these situations. So then, if you sit there and you've been doing it however many years and you've looked after these, amazing players, I think it's quite easy to gain that trust, and that's why it's really important that ours is delivery on trust. And by that, simply roll our sleeves up and we do whatever's necessary. So the travel is just part and parcel of it. On the phone, um, again, just to share, like there are moments, like anybody, like my phone rings and I don't want to pick it up, or
Yeah,
the kids are doing, and I don't want to answer the call. But I think you have anchors in your mind that's a non-negotiable, right? So I make and receive on average 70 calls a day, and that's just becomes behavioural. It's just part and parcel of what I do. It's so funny. I have a 13-year-old and a 9-year-old, and we were looking back at some old videos the other day with my 13-year-old, and when she was literally just starting to talk and walk, the number of videos she's got, whatever is close to her, and she's lifting it up and putting it to her head, and she's like, and she's basically because she always saw me on the phone. Like that's what grown-ups do. They're on the phone.
yeah,
So yeah, rightly or wrongly, it's a big part of what I do. So to come back to the question, typical day, it's people, right? That there's no typical day. Um, I guess one of my bugbears, time is something I'm not long on. So if I try and be efficient with time, I might think, right, today, perfect. I am going to do this by that time, that by that time, da da da. And I could phone 10 sporting directors before, 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, thinking I'll box all that off and I'll have the afternoon off. And then they're in their environment, they're in, strategy meetings, recruitment meetings, who's fit, team selection, recruit, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden they want to phone me back when they get in the car on the way to a game or on the way back from a game at 9, 10 o'clock at night. And what's set out from me trying to be efficient and achieve something on my time frame has just created a whole load of work for me at 9, 10 o'clock at night. But hey, I always say in football, like you've got to pick up your phone because if you don't, it'll be you'll be sat a long time waiting for it to ring.
yeah. No, that makes sense. Always be available and try to deliver as best as you can. Do the work. I think I mean, it's like you said earlier. It sounds simple, right? Like, but it's not always easy, but it is kind of simple, like in concept. Just do the work and be available. Um, no, but I mean, that makes sense. I totally. I mean, I it would be hard for me at first. I think I'm not naturally a phone person. I mean, I didn't have a cell phone until I was a junior in high school, so 16, 17. And so I spent a lot of my life without a phone, without the internet. Really didn't have internet until I was
Yeah,
10 or 11. And so some people, kids these days, they don't understand. But I've learned as like a therapist and things like that, and as I've moved into maybe working with athletes here and there, like being available. I do have to step out of my comfort zone. I do have to make that adjustment as well. If, like you're saying, you want to be involved in it, you have to kind of step outside of your own. I think that's where growth happens too, outside of our comfort zones and things as well.
Def-
Um, so about clients and things. So, and maybe you can add a little bit more depth is when it comes to players or coaches or anyone that's potential clients. What do you are you open to anything? Are there deal breakers? What are there things you look for in clients that would make them a good? What would make you maybe not feel comfortable with maybe taking on a player or a coach as a client for your agency?
Look, we're first and foremost we're running a business, right?
Yeah.
I have a real um, a place. I've got a real sense of mine and our worth, if that makes sense. And I don't want to sound too kind of up myself, but like the way we choose to do things and how hands on we are because of everything I said there in terms of not taking it lightly. A, that's not for everybody, and B, with the greatest respect, the clients have to be at a certain level or the potential that we believe they're going to operate at a certain level. Um, so it's not a commodity play. It's not for the masses. We tend to. There are commodity players out there. There's a lot of agencies that will have hundreds or thousands of players, and they literally just stack it high, sell it cheap, offer a pretty Me Too service to everybody, and then as soon as somebody catches fire, all of a sudden, then they give all the add-ons and everything else. We tend to do that work up front, and we make a commitment to the player. And listen, we get loads wrong, but we make a commitment to the player that I always say, like, if your career is going to be this, and with an agent, it's still that. And without an agent, it's still that. Then don't have an agent. Our
Mm,
job is we've got to add value. We've got to make sure that that their career ultimately outperforms where the natural pathway would have taken them. So there is a minimum sort of entry level, whether that be around the league that we think they can play in, or the level of earnings that they think we can get, or we think they can get to. And then once they've passed, those kind of initial tests, it's a people business, right? And I've scared many people. I've scared a lot of players away because I'm the guy that says goal without a plan is just a wish. I'm the guy that says what you do in 6 months you can do in 6 weeks, and
mm,
I think if you cling on to that, like on average, one season is 8% of a player's career.
yeah.
So you can choose to of course, we've all got choices to make in life, right? We all made a choice this morning when we got out of bed. I made a choice today when I came on here. So you can choose to apply yourself. You can choose to go through the motions. You can choose to not things that need dealing with. You can choose whatever. You make choices every single day. So for me, it's a partnership from day one, and I'm really comfortable in our value and service proposition. I can't train, I can't play for a player. I can't positively impact what they do. Once they cross the white line. So if they're you know willing to commit, if they are willing to conduct themselves, in the training ground, in games, if they're willing to be coachable, if they want to learn, adapt, apply, then I'm all for it.
Mm,
We'll support you and we'll be in your corner and we'll fight for you in a single action. If you want to be passive or a thing I hear a lot, young players like, oh, I'm going to change agents because I didn't get a loan.
hmm,
Okay. So, yes, I'd like to think I've been around a while. I'd like to think that managers and heads of recruitment and sporting directors would listen to my opinion, but that's all it is. And I always say my opinion counts for nothing. The second best answer is a quick no. So, if you haven't got a loan, how much have you looked within, and what
yeah.
have you done in training to make your coach recommend you when they get a phone call? What have you done within 21's games? What have you done in those moments when you've had opportunities in the first team? Are you a good pro? So on and so forth. And quite often the answer lies they've not quite done enough. And
Mm,
their natural reaction to that is to change their agent. Um, that's probably not something that we want to get mixed up in because,
mm,
just by coming with OmniSports doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're gonna, get a loan to a Champions League club or whatever.
Yeah. It almost sounds like there's a little bit of reality checking for some players and kind of challenging them a little bit in some of their mindset, some of their expectations, maybe just kind of aligning them with more reality with where they are developmentally, maybe where they are just skill wise in their career. And I mean, not everyone's a Messi, some people, I mean, how much of your role is kind of giving, like lending voice to some of the things you just said and asking them and challenging them, and how much of that even involves maybe communication with coaching staff and whatnot to try to get everybody on the same page.
It's a super fine line.
Yeah.
So I see a critical error in a lot of agents. I would get a lot of people applying to work for us. And quite often, if I interview them, I see a common trait, and that common trait quite often is desperation on their part. And quite often, that desperation is he needs to do that better, he needs to do more of this, he needs to do this, he needs to do that. And if it's a good person who wants to do well, then maybe they're just doing everything, and actually the gap is their ability.
Yeah.
So I think the reality is, and there's a fine line, help and harm, right? But
Yeah.
like it's not a job to just take out our pain on players, and because we want to do better and be in better situations and have better players, just batter your players all day every day. That's the harm bit. But I think the help bit is like we have to we've got to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. And that ultimately is on a journey to accountability. And yeah, like I said, if one season is 8%, it's how quick can you get ahead of things, and how quick can you onboard information and acquire things that become activity and then behavioural. So you're maximising those 8% as opposed to them
Yeah.
passing you by. Yeah, that's the challenge, is just kind of holding them in that accountability as opposed to giving them easy out, because it's so easy to blame other people. Oh, I didn't play on
Yeah.
Saturday, yeah, because the coach is this, or I didn't play on Saturday, yeah, because he's whatever, and because of this and because of that and well, no, let's sit with that. Why didn't you? What did this week look like? What was your pre-activation like? What were you like in training? What was your extras like? How did you look after your body? What was your nutrition like? What was your sleep like? And if the answer is we obsessed over everything and we did absolutely everything that we could do within our capabilities, then quite often time fixes things. I think in terms of speaking to coaches was something you mentioned there. Again, that's that delivery on trust. I call it triangulating. Like, people lie in life, right? Like, if you ask people direct questions and the truth is a little bit uncomfortable, they
Yeah.
might just tell you something which sounds like a good thing. So rather than relying on what that player's told me, did he go in the gym? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, I was in the gym. Yeah, yeah, I was in the gym. I'll speak to the S&C coach and I'll say, so he was in the gym. Yeah, he was in the gym. How was he? He was choosing the music and he was playing the fool, and yeah, he did his set, but he could have applied himself. Then
Mhm.
there's your, and that's the level of commitment, and that's the level of application we need to get to. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's, and again, back to that delivery on trust. Like, I could choose to. I spoke to him. Yeah, he went in the gym. Or I could choose to, okay, he said he went in the gym, and then I spoke to his S&C coach, then I spoke to his actual coach, then I spoke to the sporting director, then I spoke to the physios, and actually we need to do more. So here's an action plan, and this is what we need to do, and then that'll form part of his plan, and so on and so forth. So yeah, the main thing I would say there is accountability, and
Mm.
not in a harmful way, but like I say, holding them in that space of being accountable and what does good look like, and how do I maximize my time as opposed to just going through the motions.
Yeah, I mean they have a big role to play in their career, right? A huge role. And like you're saying, I think you had mentioned telling them what they need to hear, not always what they want to hear, and that comes back to what we were speaking about earlier with the people they surround themselves with. Are they going to tell them hard truths sometimes? Are they going to challenge them? Things like that. How do you get them to get 100% out of that 8% of their career, as you were saying? And I think that the little things, the mentality, I think mentality is so huge. Like you're saying, just how much are they pushing themselves? How much are they committing? How much are they sacrificing? Resilience, things like that. And so, um, no, that makes sense, and I think that it's refreshing to hear that you're willing to challenge and things. I do think that, and maybe this is aging myself, but I do feel like it's maybe a generational thing sometimes because I work with young clients. I see sometimes it is easy to for them to blame other people sometimes and to look inward, maybe have a little bit of reflection and things. And sometimes I do have to challenge them and offer a little different perspective sometimes. It's not always easy. It's a little uncomfortable at times, and you run the risk of some pushback, or you run the risk of maybe there being a little bit of a wedge between there. For in sometimes that's very short in my experience. I don't know what it's like for you, but it can be hard. But I think that that's part of that again, that delivering that trustworthiness. And I think what you say, you take your job so seriously, you're willing to do that because of what's best for the player themselves. And so, no, it's good. What about clubs? I know I asked maybe red flags with clients. What about when you're working with clients and there's clubs that are interested? Are there red flags for potential clubs and things that or deal breakers that or things that you look for rather than maybe things that you look out for? What are there, anything like that?
I just said people lie, right?
Yeah, yeah, they do.
And there's people in clubs, right? Um, Look, things, nothing in life tends to go exactly as we plan for it to go. So,
Yeah,
um,
I wouldn't have a job if that were the case, right? It's just the way
yeah,
it is.
exactly. So, look, there's good and bad in everything. Um, some people's version of a good club may be different to mine simply based on experience. Um, I think on balance, football's full of really good people. Like the majority of people are, they want to help and they want to develop and they want to have a positive impact. And the sheer notion of like, you know, owners and managers and coaches and all it's all an environment and a support network for a player. So it's difficult to not see the good in that. But then not every single situation works out. Um, I would pathway obviously is huge, right? Because you've got to have a to fulfill your potential. You've got to have a platform, right? You've got to have Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock, or well, not many games are Saturday afternoon, 3 o'clock anymore, but you know what I mean. So like, and everything's done with best intentions. So, but not everything works out. So again, like I'm huge on planning. Like I've just said there. My guys in the office take the mickey out of me. Like goal without a plan is just a wish. And some of the greatest things I've ever received. A player will give us a match day shirt, and they'll be stood over it with a pen, and they're like, "What should I write?" And I'm like, "Well, if I tell you what to write, it's probably not going to be that sincere, and it's not going to be that meaningful for me. So write whatever you like." And I reckon we've probably got 5+ shirts in the office that literally say a goal without a plan is just a wish, which for me is like, it's immense because that's the impact that I've had, that I've managed to infiltrate their activity and behavior to an extent where they've adopted my language. And
Yeah, it's a testament.
yeah, and the whole thing about planning, I obsess over it. We have to have a plan with every single player. We agree that plan, but then the next thing we do is we sit down with the club and we communicate that plan to the club, and we've got to be flexible, right? We say, listen, this is our plan. Are we like too emotionally attached here? Are we overvaluing his talent, his ability, his potential? And then we get them on board with the plan, and you'll have speed bumps along the way, but equally it gives them ownership, it gives them accountability that then I can go back to, and I can say, well, from everything that I can see through all my triangulating, through all my conversations, he's doing his bit here. So if it's just a time thing, we're willing to be patient and we'll wait for an opportunity, but is there any more we can be doing? And ultimately, if it is they've signed a 80 million pound player in their position ahead of them and he's going to get game time, but it's just going to look a little bit differently, then we can work with that, or we'll vote with our feet, whatever it might be. um, but for me, yeah, it's just an openness, and like I say, if you're going to live in that world of accountability, then you've got to communicate as well, and you've got to be flexible, and um, as long as there's no hidden agendas or nothing that's not out on the table, then yeah, we can deal with it, right? The entire system is built up to be flexible. That's why you've got loans and transfers and contracts and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think for me, it's committing to that, and then if you're robust enough and you can deal with adversity. Not everything goes the way that you set it out to be, but then it just becomes a moment, a temporary situation that as soon as there's an opportunity to put it right, we'll get back on track and we'll find the next opportunity, or we'll apply ourselves with that level of accountability and we'll regain that opportunity in that environment.
Nice. Yeah. So pathway, obviously pathway, super important. I think players want to, at a certain point in their career, they want to go to a club that's best for 'em. Maybe that means that it's a smaller club that's out of the spotlight a little bit, but they're going to get a lot of time and a lot of development. Other how important are other? I know we see it in the media. People talk about the location, maybe the coach, wages, and what. How important are some of those other factors in your experience for players, like location, the project itself, the teammates, obviously the wages, but the weather. Just kidding about the weather. Are any of those up there in terms of a hierarchy of importance for some of your clients?
Yeah, so look, I'd never hide away from it. I'm an agent, so finance is at the forefront of everybody's mind. Can't share the player's name, but I'm just off the phone to a Premier League player before our call, and we were talking about greatness and excellency and mastery, and we were talking about winning things, and we were talking about life after a career and the opportunities and doors that can be opened if you have achieved those things.
Mm,
So finance is always going to be there, right? Like just the sheer explicit, notion of a transfer fee, of a contract length, of a contract value, like that's never ever going away. But it literally is. It's a line item on a shopping list, and then further down or above or wherever that comes into play, wherever you're at in your life or in your career. Yeah, of course there are other things. Look, I couldn't say, or I wouldn't allow myself to think that weather could affect somebody's career either positively or negatively. But environment, if it's a simple no go, then I talk a lot about taking risk off the table. So if we're talking about transferring to a club and the environment, weather being one of those things, is a known quantum, then we have to play out that risk.
yeah.
And if that is, I don't want to be unkind, but there are certain places in the UK, there are certain places in Europe, I'm certain there are certain places in America which are not exactly great to live. And if that is upfront a known quantum that in their family dynamic, travel, cuisine, weather, whatever it may be, if that is going to be a real difficult adaptation, then that may be something that might just go into a cons versus a pros. But what I can't allow myself to say is if there was a stack full of pros and it was simply the weather, I couldn't say like just put an extra layer on or wear a raincoat, right?
Yeah, no, I like the weather in the UK. Like I said, before we start, my sinuses don't like it very much because it can be cold, but I feel like there's a constant kind of mugginess almost in the air, and I think that's what does it for me. But I actually like it a lot. But I can imagine for some, I mean, it is what it is. But
It's
I'm sure,
certainly
and I'm
seasonal. We certainly see a lot of variation. Put it that way.
Oh yeah, we get that here in the Midwest. We joke we get all four seasons in one day here, and then it's going to be 70 in a couple days, and then it's going to be 30 the couple like immediately the following day. I got out and played on Friday, and it was in the 50s, bright and sunny. And then the following day it snowed. Like it's just this is what
Yeah,
we get here. Um, you mentioned finances, obviously wages and whatnot. You've obviously get your fee as well. How do you? So it's been one way for at least in England, right? We've got PSR and one, but that's going to be changing right to SCR with these new regulations, this new kind of cap and things. It's gone from you can submit this many losses over 3 years. Now you get it's 85% of your total revenue. Every how do you see that kind of impacting things moving forward for you and your role and your clients and things and negotiations?
Yeah, look, just as we explained, the regulatory landscape, you have to work within, the whatever parameters are put in front of you. There's always been a budget, right? Whether
Yeah.
that's self-imposed or whether that's imposed by a governing body. And also as well, there's always been perceived value, right? And, somebody is worth something or isn't worth something. There'll always be changes, and it's a little bit like, turkeys voting for Christmas, right? Because ultimately it's the clubs that will have
Mhm.
the IP. So the regulatory landscape from a financial perspective, when I look at OmniSports and projections and planning and all the super important business things, I don't really have too many concerns because I read the other day, we're packaging the Premier League differently in Singapore now. That'll
Yeah.
increase streams, which ultimately will come through to the clubs. So whether it's rolling losses or whether it's percentage of revenue, and ultimately that revenue could increase, I think it'll land at a similar, a
Okay.
similar spot. Obviously, the MLS take a different approach in terms of salary caps. I don't think we could ever introduce something like that in the UK because it would just clunk too much with the system, and it would give probably an unfair competitive advantage to different territories, and you would just see a shift of
Right.
talent. So yeah, we've got a framework that we have to work within. There's always going to be changes, but I don't think those changes are going to be too catastrophic that it would ultimately impact negatively on the product, which ultimately is the level of players and talent and the product on a Saturday afternoon or a Friday evening or a Sunday evening,
Yeah.
Monday night or a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night or Thursday.
Right. So I do want to talk a little bit about Omnisports, but before we dive into that, if you're good on time, I've got a couple. I had subscribers maybe submit some questions that they had for agents as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
So some of these are maybe myths that you get to bust here and now. Maybe I don't know how much you want to pull back the curtain on agencies. So one person, they wanted to know if agents feed information to media or figures like, like Fabrizio Romano, for instance, to behind the scenes to facilitate maybe their own interests or the interests of their clients. So that was one person's question. I don't know if that happens, if that's something that you what are your thoughts on that? Does that happen?
That's a really valid question, right? And um, it wouldn't take a genius to work out. There are there are only a limited number of participants in a transaction, right? So then, if some guy sat behind a keyboard is privy to information, it's come from somewhere. So then you would think, okay, whose interest is it in
Hmm.
to give that information? I think quite often it's just relationship based. Um, so if somebody has a relationship with a journalist, they've got a respect level where they've got a job to do. So they may, um, this notion of transfers blows my mind. Actually, that people actually make a living from it. Maybe I should do that. Um,
Missed the
so,
trick there.
like, there seems to be a real appetite to be first nowadays, and
Yeah.
actually, whether you're right or not is kind of immaterial. And I can only speak for myself, but like it amazes me, like something will be written about my client where paperwork's been prepared at a certain club, and I'm like, we turned them down weeks ago, like that's not happening. And you might correct, but then if you correct people, you've got to be careful because you're showing your hand, right? If you confirm or deny something, you then have to confirm or deny everything. And by
Yeah.
not confirming or denying, you're giving them a potential read to run with something that's either true or not true. And like I say, quite often, who cares about the truth is just getting something out there. So the thing I would say is, and this is just my personal take on it, so this isn't an industry thing and it's not a written rule or anything. Like I'm not a big message sender. I'm not a big game player. I certainly wouldn't negotiate through the press. My skill or my player's ability will give me the required leverage or IP or value or wherever I need in a certain situation. And I think actually it quite often would have the exact opposite effect because um, it's all demand driven, right? So if I
Right.
want to put it out in the press tomorrow that these five clubs all want my player, if anybody was interested, they could actually sit down quite quickly and work out which ones probably do and which ones probably don't. And therefore, if there is one name on there that actually don't have the demand, then it's just for that purpose to create some smoke, to create some fire.
Don't I
And
know it? As a United fan, we see that a lot.
yeah, if you need that in a negotiation, then yeah, good luck to you because you're probably not going to come out on top. Um, those messages are like, they're not even messages. It's with your actions. In
Yeah,
those in the eye of the storm when you're in there. So yeah, really valid question. I can only speak for myself.
yeah.
I'm not a big. For me, information's power, right? So give it away at your peril. It's for me, it's my greatest IP.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I fully agree. There is a weird obsession these days, a trend with, like you're saying, the transfer news and wanting to get there first. I oftentimes on the channel joke that I'm boring because I don't do an hour show on every single rumor that pops up. And then this is going to make me sound arrogant. I'm not arrogant. I don't spend a lot of time on rumors from sources that I don't really think are legitimate or trustworthy and things. And so I am a bit boring, but I do prefer to talk about the stuff that's actually legitimate and interesting and valid. And so I totally hear you. One person asked, and again, this isn't directed at you. This is just agents in general. Do agents constantly angle and agitate for moves because they want to get kind of their cut from the transfers that happen, right? Because you player signs for your club, the agent gets a cut. And some people in the fan base, in football fandom, they kind of have that kind of mentality, right? Is that something that happens, you think, or is that kind of wide of the mark?
Um, there's got to be a fall guy, right? There's got to be a bad guy in most
Yeah.
situations, and quite often it's the agent. And do you know what? I've got broad shoulders. I think be that bad, be that fall guy. Um, Legally, contractually, there is a clause in there about stability of contract and maintaining a healthy relationship between all parties. Me being included, the club is another party and the player is another party.
Hmm.
So be really careful with that one. And then again, I'd kind of be a fraud, right? If I'm talking about planning, if I'm talking about maximizing potential, ability, talent, being accountable, if it's then as flippant as like kicking up a stink to get a move and to get an agency fee or to get an extra few quid a week, like is that really in line with all of those things? I don't think so. So again, I can only speak for myself. Yes, there are untidy moments when things come and don't forget, like everyone's a part of this, right? Like nobody likes to see a club selling one of their best players.
Yeah.
So the clubs need to come out clean. The player needs to come out clean enough to be able to go back there in a few years' time, clean enough to be able to have an opportunity at his next club. So if you want to blame the agent, blame the agent. But
Yeah.
I think quite often the way it's written versus the actual reality are two different things.
Yeah, it does seem. I mean, everybody. It's human nature, right? We need something to point a finger at, and I do think that, yeah, oftentimes. I mean, it's unfair. Agents are usually the quiet ones. You don't hear a lot of quotes from agents or anything in the media, and so it's usually easy to point the finger at them. Um, but yeah, I do agree. You've got the ability, I think, to weather that storm. As an individual, I've seen it. What age? What age do oh, man down.
I'm
What
back. So,
what age do players start getting agents? At what age does that start to kind of become a thing?
so the regulatory landscape again is I should know this exactly, right? But I think it's the season in which, or calendar year in which they turn 16. Um, we as an agency tend to, quite often, we're like, it's not uncommon for us to be a player's second or third agency.
Okay.
Um, because the level of work that is required with our version of how we do things, there's a huge attrition rate. If you were to, like, if we were to sign 100 players at 16, here you go. So just the other day, I read that there's 10,000 players in academies in the UK or in England, and 200 of them will get a career.
Yeah.
And in that 200, and just by sheer economy of scale, like probably 50, 75 of those will be a low league career. So out of those 10,000 for OmniSports, there's probably 25, 50 that we would target. Our backer processes, we've got some great analysts, we've got some great scouts, and our backers to get more right than we get wrong, but we still get a lot wrong. So yeah, legally, like I say, it's the wording around that when they turn 16. But that journey from age restricted football, right, is just fraught with failure and attrition. And sorry, failure is a terrible word, but like, you understand what I'm saying, right? Like in
Yeah. Yeah.
terms, like, you go, just the sheer like structure of football. You go like, under, I don't know, when do you start? Like under sixes, let's say, or I don't know, like an
Yeah.
academy under eights or something like that. So you go through all these age, even the national team goes, under this, under that, under the other, and then it goes under 18s, under 19s, under 20s. It gets super serious at under 21s, and then obviously you're at the pinnacle with the full national team. So the whole system is, kind of, it goes like that, and then it goes to open age football. So for us, we would spend the majority of our time either with established professional players, like I say, just off the phone to a Premier League player there, or players that we think have kind of put those days of age restricted football behind them, and now it's about, okay, where are they going to land, and how can we help them just outperform and break out of that normal distribution curve, and how can we really help them go on and get the career they deserve at the elite level.
Gotcha. Yeah, the age thing, obviously that's going to play a big role in it as well. Do parents or clubs, when they've got a prodigy, I guess, at a young age, do they kind of start to want to get them represented at all, or is again just the regulations kind of keep that from happening? There's nothing like behind the like under the table going on, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah, I think for parents, I see the good in people, right? So I think for parents, I think it's great that they want to improve the circle, and they want expertise and professionalism around the table. So for parents, it's just getting the right thing for their son or daughter. No issues with that whatsoever. I do have a little issue with younger players. I think quite often an agent is a bit of a trophy asset, and it's
Mm,
like able to say, to a girl or a boy, like, "Hey, I've got an agent because I'm that good a football player that
yeah,
somebody actually wants to represent me." So you've got to be careful with those ones. Um, but yeah, I think on balance, what I see, like I say, because our approach is everything we've discussed today. Um, yeah, it's a process, and okay, we've got a chance, right? We've got a chance of a career. So how do we increase that chance by getting the right people in the right seats? And an obvious seat is an agent. So let's speak to some agencies. And we enter a lot of races, right? I've got a lot of staff, and it's the job to get in those races. I hate to lose, and it's a trait that I try and not feed too much. But like, yeah, we do. We enter far more races than ultimately we win. But that's down to people, personal choice. So I've never have an issue. I wish anybody all the best, and hopefully their careers go on. Obviously, I believe that they would have fulfilled it even greater with OmniSports at the side,
yeah.
but life happens.
How, how many of your clients' matches do you actually get to as an agent with so many clients? And right, I mean, you can't obviously get to all of them. Are you able to get to a good number of matches throughout the season, though?
Yeah, and obviously video and
Yeah.
data and analytics makes it so easy nowadays. Yeah, at the weekend, I'm trying to think back. Yeah, I was like 4 games in 4 days, and
Wow.
quite quite often on a Saturday I'll go to 3 games because you can do midday, 3 o'clock,
Yeah.
5:30, or an evening game. Um, I still believe, and don't forget as well, for an agent, like, yes, there's watching your client, and yes, there's a duty of care, and yeah, you've got to see things through your own eyes. But also as well, going to a game is an industry in itself, right? There's a boardroom or a scouts room, and there's a network, and there's a whole host of things that can come
Yeah.
from matches and speaking to people. So it's a huge part of our activity and behavior. Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, OmniSport. I was doing a little research on OmniSports. I mean, very, very, very impressive. As you've got a nice office in Manchester. Might have to stop by and bring you some Starbucks or something next time I'm there.
Absolutely.
But it sounds like, and you even said this, it is a bit of an extension of yourself, right? You say this on the website, whether that's the trustworthiness, the showing up for people, the delivery, and things like that. But you also talk about how it's about off-pitch success for your clients. In what way? What do you mean by that when you say it's about off-pitch success? What role do you guys play in that?
We have a pretty non-negotiable. I think our job. These are really young guys, right? Even a seasoned professional is still in his 20s, so he's got more of his life ahead of him than's behind him. So they're still young guys or young girls, right? So um, it's a non-negotiable. We have to develop not just world-class footballers, but world-class human beings as well, and it's an incredibly privileged journey. I talked about privilege for us being involved in players' journeys and being involved in football, but to be a footballer it's incredibly privileged, um, and that hasn't to be taken granted. So, like, again, I can only speak for ourselves, but we have some clients turn up, and we've taken them from another agency, and the first time they come into the office, they bring a plastic bag full of mail, and their expectation is that we're going to open it and go through it all for them and deal with speeding fines and deal with whatever else. No, no, no. You sit there, you open it, and you deal with it, um, because life's about being able to stand on your own 2 feet as well and be accountable for your actions and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it's huge. I don't take it lightly. Look, again, I can only speak for ourselves. I see a lot in other agents and agencies that, because of something within themselves, whether it's an anxiety of losing a player, we all lose players, right? And it's part and parcel. And thankfully, we've been around long enough that gaining or losing a player would never change the direction of a business. And I think if you're true to that, then you have to be cruel to be kind. And yeah, it would be so easy for us to say, oh, don't, yeah, no, you shouldn't have got a parking ticket. No, you should have got a parking ticket, because it really
Yeah.
clearly said park within the bay and only for the allotted amount of time. And you didn't do that. So you got a ticket. So you are now going to open that ticket and you are going to pay it on time. And if you're not, you're going to pay the penalty and so on and so forth. And if
Wow.
you don't pay, you're going to get a CCJ. And if you get a CCJ, you're not going to be able to get a mortgage. And if you can't get a mortgage, maybe you won't be able to, whatever it is, right? So I really feel passionate about this, that like I say, the bad I see is like, oh my God, like their expectation is that we're going to mollycoddle and we're going to do everything for them. And if we do
Yeah.
everything for them, then they could never leave us. So actually, yeah, we are going to do everything for them. Like, no, no, no. You have your own values, you stand by them, and there's very little to no flex when it's on to really important issues like that. So yeah, they've got to learn how to operate in life, not just within the white lines, right?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds a lot like player care role responsibility is what some of the things they're expecting you to do. I just finished a player care certification course as well. A lot of that had to do with some helping them deal with moving, legal issues, things like that. So it sounds like a lot of things fall under player care, but hopefully, I mean, and I agree with the approach. I do think that it is long term, and that's like kind of like a therapist. Like, I can't just tell people, think therapy, you just tell them what to do, you give advice. A lot of it is just, I may know the solution, I may see the solution, but I have to let the client kind of go through the trauma, sometimes the work and the struggle to get, because it's going to be better for them in the long run to strengthen that side of them, to learn that lesson and to go through that little journey. And yes, a parking ticket is not the same as like a lot of other things, but but I totally get your point. I see it all the time. And maybe that's plays into my next kind of questions that have to do with the PFA. So I'm sure working with players, especially players who are traveling from other countries, maybe even their family can't travel with them right away. They're alone, they're young, struggling with injuries, struggling with anxiety, maybe their questions about their career. How did you get interested in the PFA course, and how do you see that playing into your role as an agent? What kind of takeaways have you gotten from that?
Um, like a lot of industries, there's a union, right? And there's a union, whether it's the PFA here in England, or wherever you are. So they've got a huge role to play. I think the PFA here in England, Maheta Malonga, the chief executive now, I think he's been in the role probably, I don't want to say exactly, but certainly 5, if not longer years. Um, and he's had a really positive impact. I think they've got a really tough job to do because it's so layered, right? You're a Man United fan. You've got your Man United players, and then you've got your, kind of League Two players, and the kind of needs and demands are completely different. But the union is kind of all things for all people.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, they've got a huge role to play. Obviously, our touch point was around education. I see some great things that they're doing in terms of preparing players for that next chapter of their life after playing. So yeah, the PFA it's a huge. It has a huge part to play. I even saw, funnily enough, you mentioned the financial regulations that are due to come in. They released a statement about that, because ultimately they're backing the players, right? And if there's going to be a restriction in terms of what can be paid and can't be paid, then the PFA are going to fight it. So I saw that they'd released a statement on that. So no, I think it's really good that they're present and they're heard. I guess my only listen, I was a player, right? And the PFA have been great for me in terms of supporting me, even as recently as the last 12 months on the course that we did together. In the same way that I just explained, an agent and player relationship needs to be a two-way thing. Um, I think the players could do more as well. I think the players
mm.
could be more involved to help that ecosystem and make the PFA's impact greater.
Yeah. Maybe take a more active role in advocating for any of the changes or any of the improvements, or even just the path, the direction that it's going. I know, and obviously, I'm not a player, so I don't know that side of it. I have the little window into that whole world that I got through the course, but it was a great experience. Obviously, we had a lot of individual seminars on things like empathy, all the shareholders involved in various aspects of a player or a club or a match day experience and things like that. So, was there anything that you learned in the course that was eye opening? That was something that you've implemented since or plan to kind of implement on a more regular basis as an agent?
Um, I felt like so. I don't know how much you've spoken about it before to the people watching, but like we did a course on sports psychology, leadership, and emotional intelligence, right?
Yep.
I'll never forget the day that landed in my inbox. I kind of wish I'd missed it, but anyway. Uh, and I remember reading it and just thinking, oh my gosh, that is like my all day, every day, like every action, every synapse of me all day tracks back to one of those three things. And then what kind of smacked me was like, I am completely self taught, um, through experience. And then I guess if you're on a journey to truly help people, you have to help yourself and you have to be in the best position to be able to help people. So really quickly, I got to a situation where like, oh my God, I can't not do this. I need to find the 20 hours a week alongside running a business, a family, and all the other things that I fail at every single day. So then having gone on the course, uh, a lot of it was quite comforting, if I'm honest, because I'd say I've got like this huge practical experience, and then all of a sudden we're getting all this theory. And quite often I was like, oh wow, I can apply that situation that I dealt with last week, last month, last year. And yeah, I got there, but I kind of tripped up over it, or it took me a while to get there. Whereas I think now I'm far better equipped at having the skill set or the toolkit to be able to understand the practical reality of what's going on and then apply the theory. Obviously, you and I were in a lot of breakout groups together. I can't say I would do it with anywhere near your level of IP and intellect, but yeah, I've really benefited from it. I feel like, look, I'm a huge backer of education anyway, right? I
Yeah.
know. I mentioned something earlier on that was man's greatest ever invention, but education's certainly up there with it. So I'm a huge backer of education, and um, I really I found it thought provoking, and without sounding too grand, like it's a superpower. Like I'm even, I spoke earlier on in the early days of like almost like an inertia or anxiety of, wow, I've got this, kind of hugely privileged position where I'm meant to be this person who sees and knows everything. Yeah, I just feel far better equipped, and the lot of the theory, particularly the sports psychology theory, was, yeah, I found it mind blowing, and like I say, kind of comforting that I'd kind of got there in when I retrospectively applied certain situations. Okay, I got there, but I kind of tripped up, and whereas now, like I say, that superpower I think is faced with that practical situation. I've got a toolkit to select from to then apply and deal with it better, for want of a better
Yeah,
word.
and I think some people are surprised. Like for me, when I as a therapist, when I tell clients like we're I'm not like an expert. I have the training, I have like the tools, like you're saying, the toolkit. So what I tell them is imagine that along this process, and maybe for you it could be almost similar as with the clients. You're kind of hiking. You're both kind of on the path together. You just know first aid. So if and when situations come up, you guys are both experiencing it, but you've got maybe a little bit more in the toolkit to handle these situations, to respond to the situation. That's how I feel sometimes as a therapist. I'm in it with you. If you get a cut, I'll help you fix it, kind of a thing, and we'll keep moving forward. And so, yeah, I was just curious, being an agent, what the thought process was going into the course and what you got out of it, and things like that. I'm glad to see that you got some stuff out of it. Obviously, I think it was beneficial for. There was a wide range of people in the class, right? Players, coaches, and things like that. And so it was really good to see people engaging with it. Like I said, you had asked me a couple questions about the psychology. You were really engaged with it as well. So it was a good learning experience for me as well. I really thought it was a great experience either way. Obviously, it was a year-long course, and there was a lot to be taken in.
Look, I think we're on here today, right? Like,
Yeah,
so I like to think I've got a pal for life, and if nothing else came from it, that's great. But I think also as well, like, I also saw, this might just be my mindset, but like, I also saw upside and growth in it, if that makes sense. So rather than I'm here for you if the worst thing happens and you get cut, I think also as well, like, I might be able to avoid you getting cut,
yeah, yeah,
um, because we're in this really strange moment, world, whatever you want to call it right now, where it's great that mental health and sports psychology and psychology in general has been spoken about so much more openly. And listen, I'm from Yorkshire, right? And we're the most closed people stereotypically ever. But like, it still has a negative connotation,
mm,
and it's still like seen as a weakness. And I
yeah,
guess some of my thoughts were, how can you, if I'm saying the education's a superpower, how can you turn mental health or mental strength or mental fitness or whatever? I don't know, surely there's a better phrase for it. How can you turn that, when you come back to that 8%, how can you turn that into not just a nice to have, like it's something that you have to strive for, like an elite mindset is something, and it's not Men in Black. I can't just flick a pen and
yeah,
that's it, you've got it. But how can you educate people, and how can you put them on a pathway of dealing with adversity and robustness and accountability and all these sort of things, and really embrace it as a must have and a journey that you're on to acquire, as opposed to just, crisis management or, like using your analogy, dealing with the cut when you get it.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, we see it even outside of sport. You know, a lot of men, for instance, won't see a therapist, even though statistically they are more likely to need one. So there is a bit of a stigma there, and I think football and sport in general has done a good job recently of kind of destigmatizing. More and more players are coming out and speaking about their struggles, and I do think it has to start somewhere, and it's not going to be an overnight process. But it is, like you're saying, it is work. It is another area, I think, of development for a lot of people, is just working on the mental side of things, just like nutrition was maybe 20, 30 years ago in football. That wasn't really a thing until guys like Sir Alex or Arsene Wenger showed up and they started addressing that. It used to be, a lot of the beer culture and stuff, and it's shifted from that. And it just, the more you can kind of mainstream it, I think it will get easier. It doesn't ever make it easy, but we have to start somewhere. But that's, hopefully that's what more and more people are doing. And I think that with some of what you learned, I think that you can help bridge that gap even as an agent. When clients are struggling with injuries or personal stuff going on, like players right now, like we were speaking about before the show and things. Look, as an agent, obviously you started at one point a while back. How has it changed over the years, and how do you maybe see the role of an agent changing moving forward as just life evolves, football evolves, all that stuff? Like, how have you seen it change, and how do you think it will? Where do you see it going?
So it's a completely different landscape in a really short space of time. Like,
Yeah,
even if I go back to when I was a player, like 20 odd years ago, the majority of players didn't have an agent. I didn't have an agent, right? And my club were offering me a contract, and I was going to sign the contract. And then the captain of the team was like, "Oh, do you have an agent?" I was like, "No." And he was like, "You should speak to this guy." And he got me probably, I don't know, like a huge percentage more in terms of the contract and everything else. And it was so informal, and it just, it was, it didn't, it wasn't as above the radar, and it wasn't as available, and it wasn't as vast and as scaled and accessible and all those sort of things. And now, like, gosh, the competition, like, is fierce.
yeah,
Like, it is, like, crazy. um and that's fine. Like I say, our version of that is get a value and service proposition that you're really proud of and you believe in, and you enter the races that you want to enter, and you win the ones that you're meant to, and you go with it, and incredibly grateful for those ones and the journeys that we go on. I think the scale's not going away. Like, I can't remember the stats, but, like, when my first license number was, well, it was 140, right? So it was number 140. And I think when they got rid of the license, that became 5,500 just in the UK alone. And then
wow,
they brought the license back, and we're still in the thousands. I think it's 3,500. Um, so it's incredibly competitive.
man,
I question the competitions that some are competing in, if that makes sense. Like, there will be players. It's super easy to do the maths, right? The
yeah,
percentage of a player's salary is the commercial value of that client for a given season.
yeah,
And when that delta's not that high, there'll still be 10, 15, 20 agents, kind of running that race, which blows my mind.
yeah.
So that's not going away. I think this industry continues to look completely different, and therefore in 5, 10 years, it will look completely different again. I think the role of data is incredibly important.
Yeah, and
Um,
even that's changed with AI and things now. There's more and more clubs are no. It's no longer like a flat cap and a clipboard on a foggy Sunday morning for scouts and analysts. Now it's, do you have an advanced degree in data analysis? You might not even have to be a football person to get involved with the scouting at a club anymore. And I imagine that you said your data sort of informs some of what you do as well. I imagine that will be changing in the future too.
Massively, it informs our decisions. It informs how we measure plans. It informs how we value our clients, so it comes into contract negotiations. It comes into everything, right? So that's going to be like hugely social media.
Yeah.
You know, like gosh, I see a lot of agencies like promoting the clients with rap songs in the background
Oh
and all
wow.
of that. I
Are we
don't
going to
think.
see you rapping anytime soon, James?
I think yeah, I could probably spit more too, mate. Yeah.
DJ Feathers.
Yeah, there you go, mate. Yeah, you go. So yeah, there's a lot of things that detract, and are they really gonna? But then, unfortunately, that might be what people or players, place value in. So there's still a huge educational piece, right? For me, it's understanding what is the role of an agent, what does good look like, what is best practice. It's something I'm super passionate about.
Yeah.
Then also as well, we've got to be empathetic of our clients, right? Yes, so not just our clients in terms of our players, but also as well the clubs. Like,
Yeah.
the role of the sporting director is something we're still kind of quasi adopting in England. And the sheer notion of a sporting director, it is their job to do a lot of the things that maybe the role of an agent or what people might place emphasis on a few years ago. It's their job to cut that layer out. It's their job to do that specific role. So it's naturally gonna move with the times with that. How and what it looks like, I don't know.
Hmm.
I would back us OmniSports to not always be ahead of the curve, but at least be somewhere near the forefront. Because again, it comes from our good intentions. Like if it's the right thing, if it's necessary, then we're obligated. It's a non-negotiable. We've got to invest in it, and we've got to have the IP in house, or we've got to find the right people to contract it to.
I know it makes sense. I mean, you're worried about clients, you're worried about your business, but then you've also got to keep up with everything as well, just externally as well. Like you're saying, technology, the data. You want to make sure you're in line, and clubs are doing it. I have to do it as well. It's constant. It's work. It's constant work. It's spinning plates. Um, if you could go back to when you first started out as an agent, go back in time, what is one piece of advice you would give that version of James Featherstone in terms of or maybe someone kicking off a career as an agent? What would you say? What would you have liked to maybe have known back then?
Apart from Lionel Messi's father, right, or
Right.
Mr. Mbappe,
Yep.
I this is probably a nuance for us here. Languages,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
I did French and German to GCSE level, so at school, so I can half hold a conversation in both, as in I remember what art is and I remember certain vocabulary. Um,
It's like sounds like me in Spanish.
but I think, yeah, I really think it would be. And listen, I have multilingual staff, right? So, like I say, if it's not you, then just surround yourself with good people. But yeah, I think languages. I wish I'd pursued languages beyond just school level or GCSE level. Um, and then, gosh, it's like a job interview, isn't it? It's like, what's your strengths and weaknesses, and you kind of don't. You don't want to admit you. That's actually the worst question ever in a job interview, by the way. No, I think just what's your why? And I know that sounds incredibly wishy-washy and maybe overly privileged to be able to say that sat here however many decades later. But I think if you're really firm with that in the early days, we've played the long game and we've missed so many opportunities because of those guiding principles and what we are willing and not willing to flex. But I'm super proud of our version of football agency, whatever that is. Um, so I don't think there's anything, kind of pivotal that I wish I'd have known or would have said to my younger self or would have written to my younger self. Um, and then, yeah, if I carried on, look, I'm just going to go into consistency and working hard and things like that. But I really do think um, it's not for everybody, right? I always
Yeah.
say, like, if my motivation was something different, I'd have probably done something else. Um, but I'm so passionate about my why, which is to help people, and in particular help players. That I think if that's your driving factor, there's always people out there that want your help and are worthy of your help, and we're willing to commit to. So I don't think there's anything really game changing that I would say, other than, like I say, probably work a bit harder at school and follow a language.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no, those are good answers. I think that it seems like you kind of your hardworking mentality. You kind of knew what you wanted to do. You seems like you're naturally a good fit. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Languages do help though, but some of us, what you said though, might lead into my final question. So, final question: what's for you? What's the worst part and what's the best part of being a football agent?
Am I allowed to say players and players? No. The worst, the worst part. Wow. It's stressful. Like, there's a huge amount of sacrifice. Yeah. So it's not a particularly proud moment for me when my wife reminds me that I wasn't really around in the early stages of my 13-year-old's growing up, and ultimately that was a sacrifice and a decision I made for my business, for my clients. So yeah, I think one of the worst time is like your time and your within a certain degree, your time and your kind of direction isn't your own. Like, there are so many needs musts where you just simply cannot. Like I say, if you're so true to your why, you cannot not jump on a plane, or you cannot not answer a phone, or you cannot not take a meeting. And that's, I don't want to sound subservient, but like I say, you kind of, I'm okay with it. Like I say, when you're so clear in your why, that it's just a non-negotiable. You have to do it. But if I could change something, yeah, I would put it perfectly into a 9 to 5 or a 10 to 3, so that I could drop the kids off, pick the kids up. I could be at every football training session, every netball game. But then equally, I have got flexibility as well. So I'd like to think that I've got better at balance and, those sort of things. So yeah, I think time and stress and sacrifice is probably some of the worst things. And then the best things, some of it's just the most simple, but like, you know, talking people back from the edge and, down
Mm,
from, when they're in that moment where they think everything is so final and it's ended and they're never going to play again. I don't mean injury, I mean from a whatever situation they're dealing with, and, and giving them a way forward. Um, again, like I referred to it on a phone call earlier on, talking about mastery. Like, I have numerous moments where you come away from a situation, it's almost like, bloody hell, I'm good at what I do, and whether that's, it's not particularly in a negotiation, but in a certain moment. Um, and then, yeah, if you want a specific metric on it, of course, that's like, it's a debut, it's a first goal. It's like, I worked in a bank for 8 years. I didn't place that many trades where, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, or, I was excited
yeah.
to go back to a computer screen. Whereas I have multiple moments in my life. I'm so privileged that I cannot almost sleep at night because it's a debut the next day, or, like I say, a first goal, or a first international appearance, or a first appearance at a major tournament, or a first contract, or there's so many firsts. Like, for me, I've been really fortunate to have had hundreds of players kind of underneath our agency, and done hundreds of deals, or hundreds of whatever metric you want to place on it. But every next one, it's there first, and there's nothing
Yeah.
quite like it to be part of that journey, and a big part of that journey as well, right? And some of the gifts that you get is like, I had a player's mum, oh my gosh, like, did an entire book around a tournament, and to be in so many pictures, and to be so front and center and part of their family and part of their journey. Like, yeah, I don't want to sound like a big mushy old mess, but like,
Oh, it's
it's like, you couldn't. you couldn't think it, you couldn't create it. There's not a business. I don't think there's a business out there that you could say, okay, this is going to give this, and this is going to, put you in these situations. And it's incredible to be part of. And like I say, I don't take it for granted in any way, shape, or form. Talk a lot about how privileged we are to be invited in and to be part of so many young people's journeys. It's pretty amazing. Sorry.
No, there's no need to apologize. It's probably the perfect answer. Is just it almost it sounds similar. Almost I don't have kids, but I imagine maybe like being a parent, being a teacher. It's not about taking credit for it. It's about seeing the person that you're working with. In this case, the client. It's seeing their accomplishments, seeing them kind of experience those things, and seeing that in them. That's amazing. That's incredible. I think that answer should make anybody want to be an agent, just to maybe experience that in itself, and like you said, even just play a small role in that. But I see you as, I mean, it sounds like you are a difference maker in these lives of these players, their families. Obviously, they show the appreciation. Sometimes that's a reminder of just how much they value, they rely on you, they trust you, they respect you, and how much a part of their lives that you are. I think that's a good reminder to show that the work you're doing is good work, and it's important work, and it has value. And sometimes I imagine in many areas it can be hard to see the tangible results of that. But I think, like you're saying, those little moments have a lot of weight. So that's incredible. It was a perfect answer. There's no need to apologize for that. So, but that's all for Michael. Did you have anything that you felt like I didn't ask that you feel like people should know that you might want to share? Because that's all my questions. I mean, you answered them all spot on.
No, not at all. I think I would just drift into preaching or giving advice that I'm not worthy of giving. So no, there was nothing really from my side. If there's any kind of, if this provokes any thoughts, or there's any other questions that you get offline, fire them over. I'll answer them, and I'm sure on your next one you can read them out. Yeah, I think it's super interesting, right? And I think quite often it's shrouded in so much kind of mystery and football agency and kind of contract talks and everything else. I think, yeah, I'm just a bloke, and in quite like a lot of things in life, it's probably not quite what it's kind of what the mind or the tweets or newspaper articles might make out it to be. It's super simple. It's a people business. So I believe if you're a good human and you work with good humans, then you'll on balance get good results, or results that are palatable and we can work with.
No, I agree. I think that football agents, they have an important role, and I think, like you're saying, it is easy sometimes for us to, as fans, to look for the boogeyman, and I think that sometimes you guys do get a bad rap. But I think today you did a excellent, superb job of dispelling any of those myths, maybe giving people just a little peek as to what makes a good agent, what and how that can be reflected in just agency in general. Obviously, your business is an extension of yourself as well, and like you're saying, how it can impact players for the better, because there's a lot of that I think goes unnoticed behind the scenes for fans as well. So, but I do appreciate you taking the time. I know we spent a little more time than I anticipated, but that's not a bad thing. I feel guilty for taking up so much of your day, but I do appreciate you. I do appreciate it a lot. James, this has been an absolute pleasure. I know that you got busy time, but I do appreciate that. Again, thank you so much for stopping by and chatting with me for a bit.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, take it easy.
Take it easy, mate. Cheers.